Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the program. Today we're going to talk about the Swiss Stonehenge. They found this underwater rock formation that for a long time they weren't sure whether or not it was man-made or if it was just a natural formation that as a result of glaciers carrying these huge boulders and then melting into this lake, and then with the boulders just floating to the bottom, or sinking to the bottom rather, and forming this peculiar straight line. It's a very interesting turn of events, because now some scientists were able to get in there, deep dive in there, and not really that deep actually. There's 170 of these cairns lined up along the shore of Lake Constance, and Lake Constance itself is very, very interesting. It was formed by the Rhine Glacier. So let me pull up the map here. These are the Alps here, you can see. And Lake Constance is very interesting because it's part of the Rhine River. It's part of that water, that riverway, but it was also formed as a result of this glacier. It forms this natural border between Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. So about at the end of the last ice age and a little bit into the current period, the current Holocene period, there is this glacier here, and by about 10,000 years ago it was melting, and there were already people there. That they found microliths. They found which are, if you see my last episode, I talked a lot about a microlith, which is basically these stone tools that are very shaped and crafted in a very peculiar way that allows a very versatile tool for people to have. And then they started finding grave sites that dated to about the early Bronze Age, so about 3,500, 3,000 years ago, or 3,000 BC rather. And the Romans first wrote about it in 43 AD. So this place is pretty well documented, which is very interesting because no one really made mention of these cairns until semi-recently. So the headline reads, Underwater Stonehenge that predates the pyramids confirmed in Switzerland. So again, if people did arrange this, which the evidence is pretty compelling because they did date stuff and they went down and really investigated the entire cairn system down there. If it were indeed created by people, then it predates the pyramids by a lot. So 170 cairns totaling nearing 17,700 cubic feet, 500 cubic meters of stones were intricately placed by humans more than 5,500 years ago. So about 3,500 BC, very, very early Bronze Age. Again, this is about the time where we start seeing a bunch of graves pop up, people buried with certain artifacts like gold and jewelry and all these things. Again, which is very indicative of a few things, like some type of nobility, some type of belief in the afterlife, and a community that would support such burials, and all of these things are indicative of from these graves here. The exact purpose of the site again remains unknown, and here's a pretty cool screenshot of some of the stones, which is only about 5 meters below the surface. So it's not too deep, but again, it's deep enough to where at the last ice age it was above water. And again, there was a huge glacier here called the Rhine Glacier, and it basically spanned. There's a series of freshwater lakes here, and all of these are the result of the meltwater. Basically, these are all freshwater lakes. So they discovered the stone formation in 2015, and around then, and I'm sure somebody else noticed it somewhere along the line and just never put pen to paper and recorded it, or maybe it was and it's been lost to history. But either way, I'm sure if the Romans made note of it in 43 AD, then they probably noticed something about these stones. And they're arranged in a very peculiar way. And for a long time, they weren't sure if they were natural deposits from the glacier that I mentioned before. They weren't sure if they were man-made fortifications, if they were grave markers, if they might even be a temple. There's a lot of stuff going on, but there's 170 of them, and that's not a trivial number. And when we're talking about these huge stones at the bottom of this lake, which once was at one point a basin. Very interesting that they would come up with these dates. So here's the arrangement here. These are all 170 cairns, and they're lined up perfectly. So again, this could be natural. I mean, at first glance, it could be natural, but then when you start looking into what they've discovered, that becomes less and less likely, at least in my opinion, because they're so evenly distributed in this line here. It's so interesting that it's very rank and file, so to speak. It's very stratified. Not only are the stones a result of ancient humans, but the intricate stone formation also dates back to the Neolithic, more than 5,500 years ago. So we're talking about 4,000 to 3,500 BC. Again, it's Germany, Switzerland, Austria meet, so it's a natural border. It serves as a very peculiar landmark for everyone who had lived there at the time. So when they first noticed this, a team, they got a ship equipped with a 15-meter excavator arm, and it started removing some of the material around the rock. So there was a lot of wood and a lot of debris around them. So they were just clearing the way so they could pave the path for a study. So one of these is this is one of the debris that they found that the divers found. This is poplar wood, and there's a ton of this, and they were just clearing the space. And based on the analysis and position of how the rocks were found, it's indicative of the work of humans and not nature. Again, this formation is not. They determined that it was not random and had to have been created thousands of years ago. And so they decided to do another layer of tests this time using underwater georadar. Okay, so they use this to study the sediments, the stone deposits, and really to find any material that they could date and base their hypothesis on, just so they could further prove the point that this definitely had to have been man-made. They knew that it was man-made. They just needed the proof. They needed to build the case for that. And then again, they used high-frequency electromagnetic pulses to record the huddle layer. So basically the lake bed, there's like sediments layer is on the bottom. They were kind of mapping that out, and to locate even more stone structures, and to really get the how parallel it was with the shore. That became very apparent too. And here's a diver again inspecting the floor here of the site, and you can see some moss and some overgrowth, but for the most part you could see that there's definitely something peculiar here, and not just some natural phenomenon. So they came to the conclusion that the stones of around 40 centimeters in size on post-glacial banded lake deposits, and are located clearly above the underlying upper edge of the moraine. So this is basically a glacially formed accumulation of debris. So it's kind of like if you watch one of the videos that I did on North America and the glaciers and the immediate after effects of the glacial melting, what happened was the giant glacier was broken up and either melted, or there are little smaller chunks of ice that carried huge boulders and other debris. And when that melted and rested on the earth, when it finally landed, there would be, not only would there be big boulders, but there would be a bunch of debris as well that would litter the ground. And in this case, it became a lake. So if you could imagine the lake for a second, on the bottom would be the natural sediment, the lake bed sediment, and then all that debris that came from as a result of the melting of the Rhine glacier. So that's what they found, the unconsolidated glacial debris rather. So again, this brought the conclusion that the stone formation is not the result of nature, but the result of humans. So now what they're going to do is, they're not done with their excavation, but their marine archaeological endeavor. They're gonna there's still more things to be analyzed. They're gonna analyze more of the debris. They're probably gonna create a 3D map of not only the lake bed, but also the stones and how they're laid out. And then they're probably gonna do some excavations around the shore, because again, this place has been inhabited at the very least 8,000 years ago, probably even more, but the evidence does go back to about 10,000 years ago, 8,000 BC. So they're going to try to find any clues that may have that may indicate some sort of involvement with the cairns, or maybe even the cairns were there well before the glacier melted. So it's very, very interesting stuff. Again, this is it runs so parallel with the shore. It's such an intricate site, and I guess calling it the Swiss Stonehenge is kind of gimmicky. Obviously, it's not arranged in any way like Stonehenge is, because Stonehenge is not a site like this. It's more of like a astronomical site. But who knows? Maybe there might be some sort of astronomical correlation with this as well. But again, I did another episode a while back on Spanish Stonehenge, and again, you see it's also an on-again, off-again submerged site as well, but it's not running parallel with the shoreline. This is completely unique. I can't think of a archaeological site or a megalithic site that's even remotely the same as this place in Lake Constance. So if you happen to live in Austria, Germany, or Switzerland, and you know about this place, or if you've ever like honeymooned or got married or vacationed at Lake Constance, which again is like a hotbed for that type of stuff, and there's some information that a tour guide told you, or if you're a local and you know about the legends there, please let me know. It's very interesting stuff. It seems like there have been a lot of people coming in and out of that area. I know the Romans came in there and they talked about all the different tribes there that were living before them, and those people had to have descended from the people who buried and had all these not mass graves, but these intricate burials around the shores of the lake. So again, let me know what you guys think. This is a very interesting find, and it's very, very recent too. It's only within the last 4 years. So yeah, let me know what you guys think, and I'll talk to you guys later.